At a bus stop, the shivering girl had nothing until a child whispered, "Can you be my mommy?" The rain wasn't just falling. It was attacking. Each drop was a shard of ice, driven by a wind that clawed its way through the thin fabric of Alara's worn-out jacket. The flimsy bus stop shelter offered little protection, its plexiglass walls weeping with condensation, mirroring the silent tears tracking paths through the grime on her own cheeks. She was cold. Not the kind of cold you complain about on an autumn day, but a deep cellular cold that had settled in her bones and seemed to be extinguishing the last flicker of warmth inside her. Hunger was a dull, constant ache in her stomach, a beast she had stopped trying to fight. She had nothing, less than nothing. She had only the hollowed-out feeling of being invisible, a ghost haunting the edge of a city that glittered with a life she could only dream of. A pair of headlights sliced through the downpour, slowing as they approached. A sleek black car, the kind that purred with quiet power, pulled up to the curb a few feet away. Alara huddled deeper into herself, trying to shrink, to disappear entirely. People in cars like that didn't like to see people like her. It was a reminder of a reality they preferred to ignore. The back window glided down with a soft hum. A little face, framed by dark, silken curls, peered out. It was a child, a girl no older than 5, with eyes as wide and dark as the stormy night. She wasn't looking at the rain or the streetlights. She was looking directly at Alara. The driver, a man in a sharp suit, was visible in silhouette. He was speaking on the phone, his voice a low, impatient murmur. The little girl ignored him. Her gaze held Alara's, a look of profound and inexplicable seriousness on her small features. Then, her voice, a whisper that somehow cut through the sound of the storm, reached across the space between them. "Can you be my mommy?" The question hung in the air, surreal and impossible. It landed in the desolate emptiness of Alara's heart not as a wound, but as a seed. A tiny, impossible seed of warmth. The man in the front seat ended his call abruptly, turning. "Lily, what did I say about talking to strangers?" "Roll up the window," but the girl, Lily, didn't move. She just kept looking at Alara, her expression unwavering. How could this one impossible question, whispered from a world of warmth and wealth, change the destiny of a girl who had lost everything? For a long moment, Alara couldn't breathe. The child's words were so raw, so innocent. They bypassed all the walls of pain and despair she had built around herself. She saw not a rich man's daughter, but a child with a question that seemed to come from a place of deep longing. Forgetting her own misery, Alara offered the smallest, most fragile of smiles. "That's a very sweet thing to ask," she said, her voice hoarse from disuse and the cold. "But I think your daddy would miss you very much." The man, Julian, was now leaning over the seat, his face a mixture of embarrassment and sternness. "Lily," now he looked at Alara, his eyes quickly taking in her soaked clothes, the tremor in her hands, the exhaustion etched onto her young face. A flicker of something, pity, perhaps, or discomfort, crossed his features. He was about to speak, to apologize and drive away, but Lily's next words stopped him. "But she looks so sad, Daddy, and so cold." "My mommy wouldn't want her to be cold." The mention of her mother struck a visible blow. The man's jaw tightened, the lines around his eyes deepening. He looked from his daughter's earnest face to the shivering girl at the bus stop, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. He was a man who solved problems with money, with influence, with decisive action. This was not a problem he knew how to solve. But his daughter's words, they were a legacy of the kindness his late wife had embodied. He couldn't ignore them. He reached into the glove compartment, his movements stiff. He pulled out a thick wool blanket, charcoal gray, and a handful of bills from his wallet. He got out of the car, the rain immediately plastering his dark hair to his forehead. He strode over to Alara, holding out the offering. "Here," he said, his voice gruff, a defense against the unfamiliar emotion swelling in his chest. "Take this." "Please." Alara stared at the blanket, at the money crumpled in his fist. It was more cash than she had seen in months. It was a lifeline, but it was also charity, a gesture born of pity that stung her pride. I can't, she whispered. He pushed it toward her again, more insistent this time. My daughter is right. It's cold. Just take it. Lily was still watching from the window, her small hand pressed against the glass. Seeing that hopeful little face, Elara's resolve crumbled. Not for herself, but for the child who had shown her a moment of human connection when she thought she was utterly alone. She slowly reached out and took only the blanket, her trembling fingers brushing against his. Thank you, she said, wrapping the impossibly soft wool around her shoulders. The warmth was immediate, shocking. The blanket is enough. Thank you. She refused the money, her gaze steady despite her circumstances. Julian was taken aback. He had expected grasping desperation, not quiet dignity. He stood there for a moment, rain dripping from his chin, completely at a loss. He nodded curtly, retreated to the warmth of his car, and drove away, leaving Elara alone in the storm, clutching a blanket that smelled faintly of leather and something clean and expensive, the impossible question still echoing in her heart. The black car disappeared into the river of taillights, but the encounter left an indelible mark on the night. For Julian Vance, the quiet drive back to his sterile penthouse apartment was filled with a disquieting silence, punctuated only by his daughter's soft hums. Lily was wrapped in her own thoughts, tracing patterns on the fogged-up window. Usually, she was a whirlwind of questions and chatter, but tonight, she was serene. It was Julian whose mind was in turmoil. He was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech firm, a man whose life was dictated by data, projections, and ruthless efficiency. He managed thousands of employees and navigated complex global markets with an icy calm. Yet, the image of the girl at the bus stop, her thin frame, her shivering hands, her startlingly clear eyes that held no malice, only a profound weariness, had breached his carefully constructed defenses. More than her poverty, it was her refusal of the money that haunted him. He was accustomed to a world where everyone had a price and angle. Her quiet dignity was an anomaly, a variable he couldn't compute. Daddy. Lily's voice was small. Is the sad lady warm now? Julian glanced at her in the rearview mirror. I hope so, sweetheart. The blanket was very warm. Her face was nice, Lily said, as if stating a simple fact. Like Mommy's pictures, Julian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Any mention of his late wife, Amelia, was a carefully navigated minefield. It had been 14 months since the accident, 14 months of him trying to be both father and mother, and failing miserably at both. He had thrown himself into his work, leaving Lily in the care of a rotating cast of professional, competent, but ultimately detached nannies. He gave his daughter everything money could buy, but he had failed to give her the one thing she needed, a sense of warmth, of home. The girl at the bus stop had it, he realized with a jolt. In that one brief exchange, in the gentle way she had spoken to Lily, she had possessed a softness, a genuine warmth that his vast fortune couldn't purchase. The next day, the feeling hadn't subsided. At a board meeting, while his executives discussed quarterly earnings, Julian found himself staring out the floor-to-ceiling window of his office, seeing not the sprawling cityscape, but a desolate bus stop in the rain. He saw his daughter's hopeful face, and the girl's dignified refusal. He couldn't shake it. It felt like an unfinished conversation, a loose thread in the tightly woven fabric of his controlled world. Find her, he said into his phone, speaking to the head of his personal security, a former intelligence officer named Marcus who could find anyone, anywhere. Last night, around 8 p.m. bus stop at the corner of 5th and Elm. Young woman, early 20s, thin, dark hair. I gave her a gray wool blanket. Any other details, sir? Marcus asked, his voice impassive. She's lost, Julian said, the word feeling inadequate. Find her. It took Marcus 48 hours. Elara wasn't in any system. She had no current address, no phone, no credit cards. She was a ghost. They finally found her 2 days later, not at a shelter, but volunteering at a small, underfunded soup kitchen in a rough part of town. She was ladling soup into bowls, her movements unhurried, offering a kind word to each person who came through the line. The gray blanket was folded neatly on a chair behind her. She looked even thinner in the harsh fluorescent light, but there was a quiet purpose in her actions that hadn't been there at the bus stop. Julian went himself. He told Marcus to wait in the car. He felt a strange nervousness as he walked into the noisy, crowded room. The smell of boiled vegetables and disinfectant hung in the air. He stood for a moment, an alien in his $1,000 suit, until she looked up and saw him. Her eyes widened in recognition, a flicker of fear crossing her face. She thought he had come back for the blanket. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked over to him, her expression guarded. "I was going to have it cleaned and returned," she said immediately, her voice low. "I just haven't had the chance yet. That's not why I'm here," Julian said, feeling clumsy and out of place. My name is Julian Vance," he paused, expecting a reaction. None came. She clearly had no idea who he was. The fact was strangely refreshing. "My daughter Lily, she hasn't stopped talking about you." Ilara's guarded expression softened slightly. "She's a very special little girl." "She is," he agreed. "And she is in need of someone. My nanny quit unexpectedly last week, and I find myself in a difficult position." He took a breath, launching into the carefully rehearsed offer. "I need a caregiver for Lily, a live-in position, room, board, a generous salary. It would be a demanding job, but I saw the way you were with her. There was a kindness there." He was framing it as a business proposition, a solution to his problem, hoping to bypass the pride that had made her refuse his money. He was offering her a job, a hand up, not a handout. Ilara listened to his proposition, her mind struggling to process the words. A live-in nanny, a generous salary, a home. It was everything she had been praying for. A sudden, blinding light at the end of a tunnel so long and dark she had forgotten the sun existed. And yet, her first instinct was a resounding, terrified no. Her life had taught her that nothing came without a price, that kindness from strangers, especially rich and powerful ones, was a transaction in disguise. She had been burned before, taken advantage of when she was at her most vulnerable. The scars from that past were deep, and they screamed at her to run. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice barely a whisper, forcing herself to meet his intense gaze. "I appreciate the offer, I truly do. But I'm not what you're looking for. I don't have any qualifications. No references. You don't know anything about me." She gestured vaguely at her surroundings, at the worn linoleum floors and the desperate faces of the people in line. "This is my life. I can't just step into yours." Julian had anticipated this. He had seen the fierce pride in her eyes at the bus stop. "I'm not looking for a list of qualifications on a resume," he countered, his tone even. "I'm a good judge of character. I saw all the qualification I needed in that 1 minute at the bus stop. You were kind to my daughter when you had every reason to be bitter at the world." He saw the doubt still swirling in her eyes, the deep-seated mistrust. So he played his final card. "Perhaps you're right. Perhaps this is a mistake. But would you do one thing for me? Would you meet Lily again? Let her decide." The suggestion was manipulative, and he knew it. But he also knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that this was right. That this girl was what his daughter, and perhaps he himself, desperately needed. The idea of seeing the little girl again sent a pang through Ilara's chest. That small, serious face was imprinted on her memory. It was Lily's innocent question that had pierced through her despair. To see her again felt both wonderful and dangerous. It would make it harder to walk away. But how could she refuse? Against her better judgment, she found herself nodding. "Okay, I'll meet with her." Julian arranged for her to come to his office the next day. Not the penthouse, that felt too personal, too intimidating. His office was his fortress, a place of neutral power. When Ilara arrived, ushered in by a bewildered-looking assistant, she felt as if she had stepped onto another planet. The space was vast, minimalist, with one wall made entirely of glass, offering a godlike view of the city below. But Ilara barely noticed the view. Her attention was captured by the little girl sitting on a large leather sofa, meticulously coloring in a drawing book. Lily looked up as she entered, and her face broke into a smile of pure, unadulterated delight. "It's you!" she cried, scrambling off the sofa and running towards Alara. She didn't hesitate for a second, wrapping her small arms around Alara's legs in a tight hug. "I knew Daddy would find you,"